Welcome back to EDFF. I'm Ding, and tonight we're going to talk about some waiver acquisitions to target or to avoid this week. And if you enjoy these podcasts, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps out the channel, and follow me on X for real-time injury updates. All right, let's take a look at the news and injuries for week 2 and how that's going to affect your waiver strategy. First off, Marshawn Lloyd, he was put on IR. He'll be out 4 weeks. It's really the Jacobs show anyway. Tua, that was the big loss for the week. He's headed to IR. Another concussion. That downgrades all skill players in Miami, even if Huntley starts, which sounds like they're going to give Skylar Thompson a shot at it, but they picked up Huntley, and I think he's really who they're targeting to take them for the long term. Now, it's going to take Huntley at least a week to get ready. He just got signed, so I'm not going to start Huntley yet. I'm not going to go pick him up, and let's see if Skylar Thompson can actually get it done, but most likely not. Pacheco broke his leg, and he's on IR now. But I expect him to be out longer than the minimum 4 weeks, probably 8 to 9 weeks. Steele and Perrine are the pickups here, but I don't like Hunt. Hunt was signed by the Chiefs, but he's not going to be game ready and he's not in game shape. Yeah, there's a lot of talk of he knows the scheme, but still, I'm just not going to put my money in a guy who was cut by the Browns, couldn't even beat out Jerome Ford. Now Fields, he's going to start week 3. He's 2-0, I get it, don't fix what's not broke, but take a look at his skill players around him and how much they're actually making off of him. Honestly, this is something to avoid. Taysom Hill had a chest injury, but it's minor. He looks like he's going to play week 3, but continue to monitor if he's in your starting lineup. Now, A.J. Brown, surprise, he's out. He's going to miss a couple of weeks due to his hamstring injury. They have a week 5 bye coming up, so it's good to assume that he'll be back week 6. Dotson is not a good pickup here. Covey got 6 targets, but for like 23 yards. Can he repeat that? And that's only 8 PPR points. Probably not. Deebo has a calf strain. He's out a couple weeks. Jennings only had 4 total targets, though he could get more than that now that he's number 2 with Pearsall out. Week 9 is their bye, and I expect Deebo to be back before then. Cooper Kupp. He's out with an ankle injury for a while. Now, the Rams have a week 6 bye, which helps ease the pain a little bit, but he's probably going to need more time than that based on all the talk around it. Robinson and Atwell are probably the 2 grabs here, not Whittington. He's too young, doesn't really know the entire offense yet. And Stafford has experience with Tutu as well as Robinson. So those are probably the premier pickups there. Now, Jordan Love, he's still going to be out. He's probably going to miss week 3. All the wide receivers are downgraded because Malik is a terrible quarterback. You saw what happened to Jaden Reed and everyone else. It's just terrible. Again, unfortunately, Jacobs is the only guy you should be grabbing in Green Bay. Bigsby, his shoulder injury magically healed overnight, and he's good to go, according to the coaching staff. Ferguson might be back for week 3. Schoonmaker was really good in his absence, and that's really where Dallas needs to go with the ball is to the tight ends. I think they'll be more successful. Hopefully, Ferguson comes back soon. Now, Ingram, he hurt himself in warmups. That's just pathetic. But his backup, who hasn't started a game, got 65 total yards. Now, I said last week they needed to target him more. Now he's week to week, so who knows? I wouldn't necessarily go and get his backup right away. I'd monitor the waiver wire and the injury wire to see what's going to happen. Now, Armstead, the starting left tackle for Miami, has a shoulder injury, and he might be questionable for week 3. Miami's hurting, and if you've got Skylar Thompson at quarterback and his starting left tackle is out, oh boy, look out. Addison, he's a potential for week 3. Monitor him. Naylor's a nice backup, but he still only gets 5 targets per game, so temper your expectations there. Again, Darnold is not a premier quarterback. Justin Jefferson has a thigh bruise, but he'll play. Don't sweat him. Andy Dalton is back. He's going to start for Carolina. The Bryce Young experiment is finally over. But you know what? It doesn't matter. The O-line is terrible. Now, this is a little bit of a bump to Thielen, so if you have Thielen or if he's on the waiver wire, he could potentially be a PPR play from a veteran to veteran standpoint. But again, Carolina is awful. This is not going to help anybody. Now, Rachaad White had a groin injury. They're saying he's probably good to go, but Bucky Irving came in and got some carries, and he's probably deserving of more carries. Monitor that. Rachaad White is probably on the edge of losing his starting gig or at least a timeshare. Now, the Jets defense lost 2 players. One, their edge, Johnson. He's been lost for the entire season. And then CJ Mosley has a toe injury. He's just week to week, but we're not really sure. It's a little bit easier to score on the Jets recently. We saw that from San Francisco, and these two injuries this last week doesn't help. Tajay Spears picked up an ankle injury. It's not serious, but he's really not a factor anyway. He's droppable unless you need a handcuff. Go grab Braylon Allen if he's available. Now, thankfully, St. Brown was only diagnosed with bruising and cramps. He says he's good to go for week 3. We'll see, but let's hope. And then Mixon. He's going to be evaled every day this week for his ankle injury due to that hip drop tackle. If he doesn't go, Akers is the primary back here. Pierce is still hurt, and even if he's not hurt, it's still Akers. Akers did fumble the ball, so he's not really a great premier option, but something to look for if you need a guy in the backup. Now, there's a lot going on. If you don't have time to monitor all these guys, follow me on X, and you'll get updates as soon as I do, I promise. Now, let's look at some key waiver wire ads you should be targeting or avoiding. At the quarterback position, Baker Mayfield. He's home against the Broncos. He's the number 1 fantasy quarterback. If he's still available, you need to grab him, if not for a backup. Derek Carr, I don't really need to say more here. Saints are one of the hottest teams. Only 21% have him rostered. He's home against the Eagles, and he's the number 2 overall quarterback. And then Sam Darnold. I know everyone's talking about him. Only 14% rostered. He's at home versus the Texans. He's terrible. I don't care what anyone says. If you think 250 yards or less and 2 touchdowns and 1 interception is elite, and you have Justin Jefferson, bro should be throwing for 350 and 3. Okay? He's not elite. He barely gets by. I'm not even going to touch him. If you want to, go for it. Okay, at the running back position, we've talked about it a little bit, but the whole Carson Steele, Samaje Perine, and Hunt situation in KC. They're at Atlanta. I don't want to touch any of these guys. I like Steele for short touchdowns. Perine is better in a PPR, but he's not going to get that much usage. And then Hunt, I'm not even sure he plays week 3. I know they're saying he knows the scheme, but he's not in football shape, Brett. And honestly, I just don't expect much from any of these guys. Somebody's going to have to step up because Pacheco's going to be out for a while. He's got a broken leg. But I just don't want to touch any 3 of these guys. I'd rather get Braylon Allen, who's only 10% rostered versus the Pats. He went into a timeshare and got 2 touchdowns that Hall should have gotten. I'd rather get him. 1, he's a superior handcuff. And 2, he has got good usage and he can show that he can score touchdowns. Now, the Pats are a tough run defense. They're averaging only 60 yards a game in the first 2 games against non-superior running backs. But there's a little bit out there to look at. So I think Braylon is still the superior pickup this week between all of those so far. Now, Chandler, the Vikings, went into a timeshare with Aaron Jones. What's up with that? And he proved himself at over 8 yards a carry for 10 carries. They're home against the Texans. I'm not sure why they had the timeshare. Maybe Jones is showing a little bit of rust in practice. I don't know. But the Texans average less than 100 yards of rushing per game given up. So it's a tough matchup, even if he gets to play in a timeshare. And then last, Bucky Irving, 34% rostered. He's at home versus the Broncos. He's pushing to earn more, and the Broncos have surrendered over 140 rushing yards per game. This is a decent play for him, especially if Rachaad White doesn't start. So monitor Rachaad White. If they're even hinting that his groin injury is worse and he may not play, Irving is a premier pickup for this week. At the wide receiver position, let's start off with Quentin Johnston. 7% rostered. He's going to be at home versus Pittsburgh. Now, why is it every time someone has a great game against Carolina, they're all of a sudden like a breakout candidate? This was an extreme outlier. 2 touchdowns. Don't even think about targeting this guy unless you're desperate. And if you're going to go there, don't even blow all your fab. Pittsburgh is a tough defense too. I really don't see Quentin Johnston being some sort of breakout candidate top 20 wide receiver. This, again, was a one-off. Robinson, 42% rostered. They're going up against the Niners. I told you about him last week. Somehow, somebody on the Rams has to catch the ball. Atwell is also there. And like I said, Whittington, he's just too young. I think it's a desperation play to go after him. I could see Robinson or Atwell being an ad, but if you're starting him, boy, you've got a really rough team. Now, 49ers are probably going to rebound defensively too after that disgusting showing last week. So this might not be that great of a play. Naylor out of the Vikings. Now only 1% rostered versus the Texans. And I told you to pick him up last week. Another week, another touchdown. He's averaging a touchdown a week, 4 to 5 targets, and he's catching most of them. That's awesome. And if Addison is still not there, then you might be able to get a touchdown out of them this week. They're going to have to score points against the Texans, but it is Darnold. So that means he's only going to get 5 targets and probably catch 4. Hopefully one of them's a touchdown. Jennings. Now he's 2% rostered. For San Fran, somebody's got to catch the ball. They're up against the Rams. Deebo's out. But when Deebo was playing, Jennings only got 4 targets. So it's likely they're going to force the ball a little bit more to Ayuk and Kittle. I still think Jennings only gets a small bump of maybe 6 targets. This isn't something that's going to really turn into Deebo type of numbers if you go grab him. And then Pierce. Again, another week, another touchdown. He's a top 10 wide receiver right now in fantasy. If Downs comes back, that could kill his looks, but Pierce is only getting 5 targets a game, but he's getting a touchdown and a bunch of yards. They're going up against the Bears. That's a tough matchup for this rookie quarterback, and it could be a bad week for all of his wide receivers. So while I like Pierce, Downs, and the fact that it's the Bears on defense limits the upside. At the tight end position, Hunter Henry, 24% rostered. He's a target monster who almost won the game by himself. He's a must-add. Colby Parkinson, 49% rostered, going up against San Francisco. Same comment. Somebody in the Rams has got to catch, but they didn't throw it to him in the last game, so that worries me. His target share is not very good, even with the loss of the wide receivers. Gesicki, 5% rostered, going up against Washington. That's a good play. He's a top 10 tight end right now. If he'd caught that touchdown in week 1 that he got robbed by the refs, he'd be in the top 5. And then the last tight end is Strange. That's the Jacksonville backup for Ingram. They're going up against the Bills. That's a tough defense. Now, he walked into the game, didn't even think he was going to play that much. He pulled off 60 plus yards. That's pretty good. Again, tough defense. Not sure I would go after Strange, especially if Ingram could come back. And then lastly, defenses. Here's a couple to take a look at. Tampa Bay is going up against Denver, and they're only 7% rostered. They have a decent defense. This is a great matchup if you can get it. Cincinnati's going up against Washington, a team who had 7 field goals last week. Now, I think they'll probably score a touchdown against Cincy, but there's an option there. And then Tennessee, up against Green Bay, where Malik is probably going to turn the ball over. I'm just going to call it right now. I'm thinking sack, fumble, touchdown. Tennessee, who would have thought? Let's take a look at week 4, just, to get out ahead of it like I think we always should. Cincinnati gets Carolina. You get a twofer here, Cincinnati versus Washington, and then Carolina. That could be gold for next week. And they're going up against Dalton, a little bit of payback. Tennessee versus Miami could potentially be the second game of Skylar Thompson, and that could be juicy for some sack, fumbles, and interceptions. And then next week, Las Vegas gets Cleveland. I think that's also a pretty good matchup, all things considered. And that'll do it for this episode. Monitor the injury updates for this week before you put in your waivers, and check my X feed for updates to help you plan. Good luck, and I hope you had a successful week too. And if not, it's a long season. Don't panic. Before we sign off, I want to give a shout out to our men and women in uniform who protect the freedoms we hold dear. Thank you for your service and sacrifice. And thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us on X, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you can stay up to date on our latest content. Until then, remember, established dominance isn't just a catchphrase, it's a commitment. Are you ready?